The sound came first, a soft scraping noise that didn't belong. Kevin's jaw froze, his hand halfway into a crate of broken circuit boards. In the depths of Sector 9, every unexpected sound could mean trouble. And trouble in the slums meant you might not see tomorrow. She was digging through garbage like her life depended on it. Everyone who passed by turned away in disgust, covering their noses and quickening their steps. But when Kevin saw her, something inside him stirred. He couldn't just walk away. "Come with me," he said quietly. The lower levels of Zirin Station felt nothing like the space stations in old movies. No gleaming corridors, no view of distant stars, no peaceful silence. Here, 8 levels down from the main decks, there were only rusted metal walls, flickering lights, and the constant buzz of overworked machines. The air tasted stale and metallic, recycled so many times it barely felt real. Sector 9 was where everything unwanted ended up. Broken equipment, failed systems, and people nobody cared about. The heat never reached this deep, and every breath carried the smell of coolant mixed with synthetic food waste and human sweat. It was a place the station authorities pretended didn't exist. Kevin pulled his work jacket tighter around his shoulders. As he crouched behind an old food vendor stall, at 32, he'd learned to blend into the shadows. His breath made small clouds in the cold air as he sorted through a box of discarded electronic parts. The metal floor under his feet vibrated constantly from the heavy machinery. Running somewhere above, he was nobody special. Just a maintenance worker who got paid by the hour to fix broken things. No rank, no badge, no protection from station security, but he didn't want their protection anymore. Not after what happened to his sister. That was something he never talked about, not even in his own thoughts. During his official work hours, Kevin fixed waste processors and life support systems in the forgotten corners of the station. But in his free time, he scavenged useful parts from piles of junk. These parts could be traded for food packets or station credits enough to survive another day. He'd learned to work fast and stay alert. Every minute spent in the open was dangerous. Security patrols came through at random times, and the slave traders who operated in these levels had unofficial permission to grab anyone they wanted. Kevin had seen too many people disappear without a trace. As he moved a broken panel aside, he heard it again, that soft scraping sound. It wasn't machinery. It wasn't the hiss of steam from the vents. It was something else, something careful and desperate. The sound repeated, barely loud enough to notice. Like someone trying very hard not to make noise. Kevin slowly turned around, rising partway from his crouch. Near the far wall, behind a pile of collapsed shipping crates, something was moving in the shadows. He squinted in the dim light, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. There, almost hidden behind torn tarps and garbage, was a cage. The metal bars were covered in rust, and the door hung crooked on broken hinges. Half the cage was buried under oily trash and empty food containers. The smell that drifted from it made Kevin's stomach turn. Old food scraps, human waste, and something sharper that made his eyes water. Inside the cage was a woman. She sat hunched over in the corner, her back pressed against the rusty bars. Her arms were wrapped tightly around her body as if she were trying to hold herself together. Her skin was blue, not from cold, but naturally blue, though it was streaked with dirt and soot. Long red hair hung in tangled knots over half her face. She wasn't crying. She wasn't calling for help. She wasn't even trying to hide from view. Instead, she was methodically going through pieces of garbage with one hand, turning over empty packages and containers, looking for anything that might have food scraps left inside. Kevin stared, his heart beating faster. He'd seen plenty of desperate people in Sector 9 before. Orphaned children, drug addicts, broken-down androids that had been thrown away. But this was different. She wasn't unconscious or screaming in pain. She wasn't begging passersby for help. She wasn't trying to escape. She was simply trying to survive. One piece of garbage at a time. Kevin took a careful step forward, moving as quietly as possible. When she heard his footsteps, her entire body went rigid. Her muscles tensed, like she was ready to fight or run, but she did neither. Didn't speak or make any sound. Her eyes lifted to look at him. Golden eyes that were dull and bloodshot from exhaustion, but still alert and watchful. He crouched down beside the cage, being very careful not to make any sudden movements. The wet floor soaked through his pants. At the knees, but he didn't move away. Kept his hands where she could see them, palms open and empty. You understand what I'm saying? Kevin asked, keeping his voice as low and gentle as possible. She didn't answer. The only sound was her shallow, quick breathing. She didn't blink, didn't look away, just watched him with those tired golden eyes. Kevin could see that her clothes had once been decorative, maybe even expensive. She wore what looked like a halter top made of thin bronze fabric, though it was now torn on one side and barely holding together. Decorative chains hung from her hips, but they served no purpose. Now, except to mark her as someone who had once been owned by someone else. Her legs were covered in grime, her knees scraped raw. Her toenails cracked and dirty. She'd been left here for days, maybe weeks, maybe longer. Slowly, Kevin reached into his jacket pocket. The woman's eyes followed his every movement, her body tensing even more. But when he pulled out a sealed protein bar, slightly smashed but still good to eat, her expression changed. Not hope, exactly, but a desperate kind of attention. He placed the food bar gently on the ground just outside the bars, then leaned back to give her space. She didn't move at first. Long seconds ticked by in silence. Then, suddenly, fast as a wild animal, she darted forward, grabbed the food, and retreated back to her corner. Her hands shook as she tore open the wrapper. She stuffed a bite into her mouth and chewed rapidly, her jaw trembling with effort. Her stomach made loud growling sounds in the quiet air. Kevin felt his chest tighten as he watched her eat. When was the last time she'd had real food? He looked around carefully, checking for security cameras or patrol routes. Most of the surveillance equipment in Sector 9 had been broken for years, and nobody bothered to fix it. The authorities didn't want to see what happened down here anyway. The cage itself was an old model, kind slave traders used when they wanted their merchandise to look exotic and valuable. The lock was basic. Kevin could probably open it. With the tools on his belt, he looked back at the woman. She had slowed her chewing slightly, but her eyes were still fixed on his face with that same wary attention. "You're not supposed to be here," Kevin said quietly. "But I'm not going to report you to anyone." Her chewing slowed even more. Her golden eyes flicked between his face and his hands, trying to read his intentions. "My name is Kevin," he continued. "I work maintenance on this level. I fix broken things." He paused, then added, "Nobody sent me here. Nobody knows I found you." Still no response, but he could see her listening. Kevin took a small tool from his belt pouch and held it up so she could clearly see what it was. "I can open this cage," he said simply. "But only if you want me to. You have to tell me yes or no." He waited, not moving, barely breathing. The woman stared at the tool in his hand, then at his face, then back at the tool. Her breathing had become deeper, less panicked, then almost too small to see. She nodded. Kevin didn't ask twice. He moved to the cage door and inserted his tool into the lock mechanism. With a hard metallic snap, it clicked open. The door swung outward with a high-pitched creak that echoed off the walls. The woman didn't move. She just stared at the open door like she couldn't believe it was real. Kevin held out his hand, palm up, keeping it steady and still. Her gaze locked onto his. Hands she didn't trust it, he could see that clearly, but she also didn't have any better options. Slowly, carefully, she shifted forward. Her knees dragged through the filth on the cage floor. Her arms trembled with the effort of supporting her weight. When she reached the doorway, she paused, uncertain. Instead of taking his hand, she reached. out to steady herself on the ground beside him, using the cage frame for support. Then she tried to stand up. Her legs immediately gave out, and Kevin stepped forward quickly to catch her before she fell. She collapsed against him, her body frighteningly cold. Not just cold from the air, dangerously cold, like her body was shutting down. She weighed almost nothing, and her skin felt clammy and damp. She made a small, choked sound in her throat, but didn't try to pull away from him. Kevin didn't say anything. He simply wrapped one arm carefully under hers and helped support her. Wait. Step by step, they moved through the narrow corridors of Sector 9. When they heard footsteps approaching, they ducked behind support columns. When they came to areas with working lights, they took longer routes through the shadows. She leaned on him completely, barely conscious, her feet dragging with each step. It took them nearly 20 minutes to reach Kevin's maintenance pod, a small room hidden behind a fake ventilation panel, locked with his personal access chip. He helped her inside and sealed the door behind them. The room was tiny, maybe 10 feet by 6 feet, cluttered with tools and spare parts, but livable. It had a narrow bed, a small electric stove, some thermal blankets, and one change of clean clothes. Kevin guided her to the bed and helped her lie down. Her hands twitched and trembled as if she expected him to hurt her, but he only covered her with his work coat and moved to the shelf to look for water. When he turned around, she was holding the coat against her chest with both hands, like she was afraid it might disappear. Kevin found his metal water bottle and placed it carefully in her hands. "Drink," he said softly. She sipped slowly at first, then drank more deeply. Her throat worked hard with each swallow, and Kevin realized she was probably severely dehydrated. He found a folded thermal shirt on his shelf and held it out to her. "You can change into this," he said. "I'll turn around and give you privacy." She didn't move, just stared at the clean shirt, then at him. Several long seconds passed in silence. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she spoke. "Sira." Kevin's eyebrows lifted in surprise. It was the first word she'd said. He nodded once, trying to show her that he understood. "You're safe now, Sira," he said, and meant it completely. He moved to the corner of the room and sat down, giving her as much space as possible. She didn't cry, didn't speak again. She just kept her eyes on him as she slowly, carefully slipped one arm into the clean shirt. She was still afraid Kevin could see that clearly, but she hadn't looked away from him, and she hadn't asked him to leave. That felt like progress. Kevin didn't sleep that night, stayed in the corner of the maintenance pod, his back against the cold metal wall, watching over Sarah in the dim amber light from the emergency power strips. The small room hummed constantly with the sound of heating coils and the distant thump of machinery running through the station's walls above them. Zirin Station never truly went quiet. There was always something running, always something breaking down. Sira had curled herself into a tight ball on the narrow bed, wrapped in his oversized thermal shirt and one of the thinner blankets. Her knees were drawn up under the fabric, her arms tucked in close to her body. She reminded Kevin of a wounded animal trying to make itself as small as possible. She hadn't spoken again after telling him her name. She hadn't cried either, which somehow worried Kevin more than if she had. Her eyes stayed half open for hours, watching him with that same alert wariness, even though exhaustion was clearly weighing her down. Kevin hadn't tried to move any closer to her. He understood that trust would take time, and he had no intention of rushing her or making her feel trapped again. It was nearly 3 standard hours later when she finally fell asleep. Kevin could tell because her breathing became deeper and more even, and the constant tension in her shoulders relaxed just slightly. Even then, Kevin waited another 20 minutes before he dared to stand up and move around, stepped carefully across the pod's padded floor, not wanting to wake her. From closer up, he could see the full extent of her injuries. There were scrapes across her legs, dark bruises on her arms, and an angry, inflamed mark on her upper shoulder that looked like a collar or restraint had been forcibly removed, tearing the skin. Kevin didn't touch her. Not yet, but he took. careful mental notes of everything he could see. She was clearly malnourished, probably dehydrated despite the water she'd drunk. More concerning, she had no medical identification band, no station ID tag, no registry tattoo that would mark her as a legal resident of Zirin Station. That meant one of two things. Either she'd never been properly processed by station authorities, or she'd been processed and then deliberately erased from the system. Someone had gone to the trouble of removing any traceable identification before caging her and leaving her to die in Sector 9. Kevin quietly retrieved his field medical kit from a storage compartment and heated a basin of sterilized water on his small burner. He added a few drops of mild medical cleanser. And the smell, clean and faintly minty, cut through the recycled air like something from a better world. He unfolded a clean towel and checked his bottle of synthetic antibiotic cream, then hesitated. He didn't want to wake Sarah, but leaving infected wounds untreated in the filthy environment of Sector 9 was essentially a death sentence. Infection spread fast down here, and medical care was almost impossible to get. Kevin knelt down beside the bed again. "Sarah," he said softly. She flinched violently, her eyes snapping open wide. She tried to sit up quickly, then pulled back, pressing herself against the wall with the blanket clutched tightly around her body. "Easy, it's just me," Kevin said, keeping his voice as calm and gentle as possible. He lifted both hands so she could see them clearly. "I won't touch you unless you say it's okay." Her gaze immediately locked onto the towel and basin of water beside him. Her breathing had become faster and shallower, but she didn't try to run or hide. "I need to clean those cuts on your arms," Kevin explained. "You're hurt, and if we leave the wounds dirty, they'll get infected. That could make you very sick." Sarah didn't nod, didn't speak, but after a long moment of internal struggle, she let the blanket slip down slightly. Her arm emerged slowly, shaking but deliberate. Kevin worked as carefully as possible, using the warm, clean water to gently wipe away dried blood and dirt. Her skin flinched with every touch, but she didn't pull away from him. He could see her, watching his face intently, not just his hands, studying his expressions, trying to read his intentions with every movement he made. His face, but his eyes, his mouth, his hands, like she was calculating something meosering threat versus safety. Judging what kind of man he really was, Kevin didn't look away. He kept his attention on his work. "I had a sister," he said quietly. "She was taken by the same kinned-off bastards that left you in that cage." The words surprised him. He hadn't planned to say them. She was younger than Medisapper during a sweep. No records, just gone. He looked up. She didn't get out. "You did," Seer didn't reply, but her shoulders lost a little of their tension. Moved too. "The collar wound, this will sting." She nodded, the first sign of voluntary movement all night as he applied the cream. Breathing hitchadance. Then Steed, he sat back, "All done. You can rest now," but she didn't lie down. Instead, she asked quietly, "How long have you lived here?" Her voice was soft, dry, like used vocal cords were struggling to work. Her accent was mild, but the cadence was velen. "Slow, deliberate for years," he said. "Long in Oto. No, this station feeds off people like you." "Like me too, honestly." She looked around the pod's small space, scattered tools. 2 blankets, 3 ration packs. On the shelf, it wasn't luxury, it wasn't even comfort, but it was cleaner than anything she'd seen in days, probably weeks. "You're alone?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "Why'd you help me?" He didn't answer right away. He sat down against the wall again, arms draped over his knees. "It's because I saw you and I didn't want to be someone who kept walking." That answer sat in the air between them. She didn't question it, but she stared for a long time, processing later, after another sip of water and a long silence. Spoke again. "They called me asset for 2F. During processing my real name, Wastripped. During intake." Kevin looked over. "You said it was Seer. It was," she said before. He nodded. "It still is." She lay back slowly, her head rested against the folded jacket he'd offered as a pillow. Her eyes closed again, not out of fear but from real exhaustion. This time Kevin watched her for a moment, then reached up to dim the lights. The pod fell into a low amber glow, quiet and still. He didn't sleep, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel completely useless either. She had a name again, and he wasn't. Walking away, this time Sierra woke before. The lights came up. Kevin hadn't adjusted the pod's time cycle, so the dim amber glow still flickered faintly in the overhead strips. She sat upright, slow, cautious. Her limbs were sore, but the violent shivering had stopped. The thermal shirt hung off her shoulders, oversized the hem, draping down past her hips, clean warm. It still smelled faintly of him metal engine oil. Something like dust, but not unpleasant, real. She looked around the pod again. Nothing had. Kevin sat near the far wall, asleep in the corner, legs stretched out, arms folded over his chest. His head was tilted down, mouth slightly open, soft snores rising from his chest. Even in rest, he didn't look comfortable. There was tension in his neck, strain around the edges of his jaw. She wondered how often he'd done this, kept watch through the night, or how long he'd gone without company of any kind. Her gaze drifted to the half-finished basin of water. The well he'd used was neatly folded. Again, his tools were back in place. Nothing out of order, nothing touched that didn't need to be, that mattered. She stood carefully. Her bare feet met the warm pat off the floor. She scanned the shelves. Only 3 ration packs remained, and one was already open. That told her enough. He hadn't planned for guests. The silence oft pod was broken when Kevin stirred, coughed, and blinked. Awake morning, Hest, rubbing his face, or whatever time it is you slept. She nodded. You didn't. Hest slowly winced as his back cracked. Didn't want to risk you waking up alone. I'm not used to that, she admitted. He stood cross to the burner and set a small kettle to heat. Still hungry? A little. Good. That means your body's kicking back in. She watched him pour the hot water into a ration tin, steam curling upward from the rehydrated meal. He stirred it once with a plastic utensil and handed it over without comment. She took it with both hands, fingers curling around the warmth. He noticed how she held it tight, like someone who expected it to be taken away. Scanned the zone earlier, he said as he leaned against the counter. Security patrols were light last night, but they're cycling again. High-value sweeps that includes undocumented aliens. She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. Kevin kept speaking serious. Now there's a biometric checkpoint 2 corridors east. I usually spoof it with a thermal mask. Bet it won't work for 2 people. You'll need something better. A temp. It's something we can patch into the Waze crew database. Her grip on the tin tightened. I don't have an identity anymore. She said they removed all trace. Kevin paused. But you still have? Anamesh looked down, said nothing. After a while, he opened a locker built into Thruel. Inside was a folded maintenance jumpsuit, gray with orange trim, oversized but functional. You'll need to wear this. Covers you up. It's coded to my access sector. He handed it over. She hesitated, then took it as she changed behind the curtain. Kevin pulled across the room. He explained. More 0 and runs 5 tiers where on 9 sub below registry level above the sewage belts. We get caught there, we're tagged. If we move too fast, we're flagged. You understand? Yes? Shasade for behind the curtain. You're sure? Yes. I'm not stupid. I never said you weareth. Curtain slid open. She stepped out in the loose-fitting suit. It hung on her frame, but her face looked different. Now clearer, more alert. A layer of grime had been wiped away. Her hair had been finger-combed, still tangled, but no longer matted. Kevin stared at her for a moment and gestured toward the corner terminal. We need to make you into someone else. He sat and brought up a registry spoofing program, an old one, barely legal even in the slums. He entered false biometric data, substituting her eye color, skin tone, and genetic markers with adjusted overlays. Then came the hard part, assigning her a job code. Custodials, too obvious, he muttered.Ogrich has watched. Food services? No, they do medical sweeps. She leaned over his shoulder. Dockside reclamation. He looked up at her, surprised. That might work. It's dirty, off-grid, and low clearance. I heard the guards talking. Gantz said no one audits reclamation crews. Too low on the list. Kevin narrowed his eyes. You're smarter than you let on. Hi to be, she said, voice flat. They only kept the ones whoobied. He didn't respond right away, just input the new profile. Sailor Ving ID 437X Reclamation Crew, 12 new name he. Said I want to keep Sarah. She said. Kevin hesitated, then typed it in as a Sokandri alias. You can keep it. But out there your van, she nodded. They printed a data chip, he'd embedded it into the collar of her suit and linked it to his contractor's access badge. She was Noah's assistant technician cleared from maintenance override. You ready? He asked. She took a breath, then another. Yes. Kevin keyed. The pod door opened. The corridor beyond was dim, but not empty. 2 sanitation drones hovered past, ignoring them. Footsteps echoed faintly, the far sector boots moving with purpose patrol. He nodded to her. They walked together, quiet but confident. Past Vince through a disused freight tunnel trod. The first checkpoint, they didn't speak, but they walked in step, and Kevin felt it for the first time in months. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was doing something that mattered, the biometric. Checkpoint sat ahead like a wound cut into the corridor wall, blinking red, humming with quiet menace. Harsh industrial lights glared down from above, flickering with interference from failing power grid. A single camera tracked the approach tunnel. No guards, not visibly, just a machine. Kevin motioned for Sarah to slow. As they reached the caution line, faint yellow markers glowed under their feet, barely visible under years of grime. He turned to her, speaking just above a whisper. Walk behind me. Don't speak unless they ask you directly. Let the badge scanner ping first, then the chip embedded in your collar will handshake through mine. Got it. She nodded. Her face was calm, but he could feel her tension, shoulders tight, jaw set, hands clenched inside the sleeves of her maintenance. So every step since they left the pod had been precise, practiced, as if she were trying not to make noise with her very existence. He stepped into the scan zone. The gate activated with a low-frequency hum. His badge flashed green. A soft beep followed. Standard automated voice buzzed. Access granted. Contractor Kevin Yor. Clearance levels of systems. Technician. He stepped aside, gestured her forward. Sarah moved through the scanner. 1 second. To a louder, sharper tone shrieked from the consolian. Registered. Genetic signature detected. Her head whipped toward Kevin's eyes. Witted scanner glowed red. Kevin moved fast. He stepped between her and the gate and slammed his badge into the override console's secondary. Contractor override, he barked. She's my assistant, just got reassigned from a damaged drone crew in level 11. Transfer code VT921. The system hesitated. The red light flickered. A grinding click echoed from the wall. A drone unfolded from a hidden compartment. Floating, scanning. Kevin kept his voice level. You want to waste time pulling every low-level worker for a genome sweep? I got for pending tickets from power relay requests and a blockade conduit in subdeck G. The drone's lens refocused. A silent delay. Then, without fanfare, the red light turned yellow. Then green. Override logged. Clarence a tempori. Incident noted. The scanner retracted. Kevin exhaled. Slowly move. Now they slipped past the gate, turned the first corner, then another, only when they reached the shadowed corridor beyond. Did Kevin press a hand to the wall and stop to breathe? Sarah leaned against the support pipe still, gripping her sleeve. She didn't speak. He turned to her. You all right? She nodded, but the nod was tight. What the hell happened? He asked. The chip was linked. The biometric override should have worked at the ran a skin depth scan, she whispered. My implants, what was left of them, must have flagged something. I didn't think they were still active. Kevin stared at her. They left trace implants in you. She looked away. For tracking, conditioning, reinforcement. It's how they monitor resellers, Kevin muttered under his breath, then started walking again. Come on, we can't risk another checkpoint. She followed without asking where they were going. They moved deeper. Beyond maintenance routes, past old data conduits, and forgotten bulkheads with broken seals. The air turned cooler, thinner. Kevin used anaveride on a side hatch that hadn't been opened in years. Dust poured into the corridor. They ducked inside. The hatch sealed behind them. It was a forgotten loading bay, dim-wide, cluttered with old crates. And a broken transport frame. One flickering light still worked above. This place isn't logged. Kevin said they stopped using it after the structural shift 2 years ago. Scanners don't sweep past that corridor, said slowly. On a low crate she looked. At her hands, I almost ruined everything you didn't. Kevin said you didn't panic, that saved us. She didn't answer right away. Her shoulders slumped. They wired me for resale, Kevin, like I was inventory hadn't. Tried to comfort her with words. Instead, he sat beside her, careful not talk road. They had a list, she said quietly, of what I could do. Why? It's been modified for every time. I disobeyed, they updated it, my value drop. She looked at him, Thenet, searching for pity. Just try to understand, why does someone like you care about someone like me? He didn't thiss it. Because they shouldn't get to decide your worth. Silence stretched between them then. With her hands shaking slightly, she reached out, not to grab him, not to cling, but to rest her fingers gently on his light testing. He didn't pull away. It sat like that for a while, not speaking. Eventually, Kevin leaned back against the wall and said, I'll get the implant scrubbed. I know Sumioni in Deck 5 who used to do off-book medtech work. Quiet, skilled. No questions. She nodded. If you think it's safe. I don't think anything's safe, he said, but it's better than running blind. She gave the faintest smile, worn at the edges. But real then. Let's go when you're ready, she said. I'm tired of being watched. He looked at her, and for the first time she didn't look like someone just trying to survive. She looked ready to take herself back. The old medtech den on deck 5 looked abandoned from the outside, just another derelict supply station tucked between a cooling tower and a wall of exposed power conduits. No signage, no functioning lights, but Kevin knew what to look for. He keyed a 3-digit code into the rusted side panel, and after a pause the heavy door creaked open with a groan like it hadn't been used in months. Sidet was dark and cramped, relic equipment stacked in corners, metakeltables stained and worn, old diagnostic rigs powered by independent cores. But lights still worked, and the air was clean. That was enough. Syrah stepped inside, cautious but calm. Kevin scanned the room, then called out, Dr. Rent. A sharp clatter answered from behind the petition. A tall, narrow man appeared, wiping his hands on a stained towel. High size augmented with green glow lenses blinked in quick recognition. Did a tech expect you to come back, Jor? Not after last time. I'm calling in my favor, Kevin said flatly. She needs an implant sweep and purge. Quiet. Dr. Rent looked at Syrah, then back at Kevin. She's wired residual trackers, not active, but dirty enough to flag scans. The doctor sighed. It's not pretty work. She'll feel it. She can take it, Kevin said. I'm standing right here. Syrah said. Her voice was steady, clear. Rent raised his hands. All right. This way. He led her to a narrow exam bench. She sat down, rolling up the sleeve of the maintenance suit. Kevin moved to follow, but she glanced at him, hesitated, then Gavi. The faintest nod. He stayed. Ren applied a conductive gel to her forearm, connected a worn diagnostic wand to her skin. Faint buzzing filled the air. Gavi watched the monitor. Tiny red nodes pulsed faintly across her neural grid map. 2 implants, Ren muttered. One the left clavicle, one the lower spine. Both passive trackers, self-contained. Energy cells. Can you remove them? Rent nodded slowly. But the back one's deep. I'll need her shirt off, and she'll need to stay perfectly still. Kevin turned to her. Do you want me to step out? She shook her head. No, stay. He moved closer, stood just at her side. She pulled the thermal shirt over her head and dropped it onto the bench. Her skin, smooth pale blue, was marked with fading bruises and thin scar lines. Rent didn't react. He just prepared the surgical wand. Syrah stared. A head expression, rigid shoulders tense. Kevin placed his hand near hers, not touching, just there. Let me know if you need to stop, he said. I won't. She replied. Thwand hummed to life. Rent worked quickly. The first implant just beneath her collar came out clean. He sterilized Theria, sealed it with a cauterizing pad. Then came the second. She leaned forward as Rent adjusted her posture. The surgical instrument pressed deeper in her back near the curve of her spine. She winced, her hands clenched into fists. Kevin stepped behind her, crouched and gently braced her shoulders. You're okay, he murmured. Breathe in and out. She did, but her jaw was tight. Her eyes watered, the wand made a sudden high-pitched sound, and her whole body tensed. Then silence. Ren stood, holding a tiny needle-sized note clamped in his forceps. "It's out." He sealed the wound, quickly sprayed. A layer of dermal mesh. Kevin helped Sailor ease back upright, was shaking slightly, her breath shallow. She didn't speak, but her hand found his wrist and gripped it. He stayed there a moment, watching her skin return to its normal tone, color flushing akin to her cheeks. He handed her the shirt, helped her guide it back over her head. Ren stepped away. "She's clean." One trigger. Any basic scans now, but if the ones who implanted her are still watching the net, they'll know she's gone dark. Kevin nodded grimly. "Then we move now." But just as he reached for his tool belt, the calm alert on the wall flared red. A message blinked. "Cross theaterminal zones, sweep en route, enforcement grade." Kevin cursed under his breath. Theer Close must have picked up the override log from the checkpoint. Rent already moved to seal his gear. Back tunnel still clear. Emergency chute leads to Deck 6 utility access. Kevin helped Salir stand. She stumbled slightly. He caught her. "You okay?" "I can run," she said through clenched teeth, "just not fast." He slipped an arm around her, pulled her close. "Then stay with me." We got together. They moved fast out the rear corridor, down the dark maintenance shaft, through layers of steam, rust, and noise. Syrah's legs faltered halfway down the twit ladder. Kevin climbed below her, bracing her foot with his shoulder. "Don't look down," he muttered. "Just move." She did, barely, but she moved when they finally burst out into the service echo rider. On Deck 6, alarms echoed faintly in the distance. Not for them yet, but closing. Kevin pulled her into a narrow crawl space behind a defunct generator stack. He crouched, breathing hard, listening. She leaned back against the wall beside him, body heaving, sweat at her temples, shirt clinging to her skin. "Is this how you live?" she asked, breathless. "Only when I help the right people," he replied. She looked at him. "I'm not weak," she said. "I never thought you were. I didn't say it for you." She shifted forward, pressed her forehead gently to his eyes closed. It just needed to hear it. Kevin stayed there, still grounded, her breath mixed with his. Then he whispered, "You're not weak, Sailira. You're the strongest person I've met on this station." Ange finally exhaled, long and steady, like a weight had left her chest. They sat in silence, waiting for the noise above to pass, locked in the dark together. Deck 6 was chaos. Alarms hadn't reached full broadcast yet, but the signs were there. Scanner drones hovering through corridors, maintenance staff being pulled aside for random checks, security drones pulsing red as they moved along grid paths with slow, deliberate menace. Kevin had never seen this much activity so deep in the subdecks they had. To our smabless, he tapped his wrist pad. A schematic flickered on the small screen, grayscale, outdated but readable. He pointed to a narrow vent passage cutting under the freight terminals and connecting to the emergency docking ring. "There's an old cargo lifeboat tied into the exterior scaffold," he said. "Decommissioned technically, but I know how to reroute the access codes." Syrah crouched beside him, still favoring her side from the implant extraction. Her face was pale but focused. "Once we're aside station grid, we drift until the main NAV beacons pick us up. I logged Adistrus beacon on a private channel knows Slaver Patrol's monitor. It will be off this station by morning." Her gaze stayed on him, and then he paused. "Then we figured out somewhere quieter, somewhere real." They moved quickly, every step calculated. Kevin led through tunnels where the lights didn't work, using hand scanners to navigate. He bypassed 2 access panels and disabled a motion trigger with a clip power relay. Sierra followed without hesitation. Her movements were stiff but determined. Shek kept her hand near her side, bracing against the bulkhead. Only when she knew he wasn't looking, but he saw she was pushing through pain, through fatigue, through the shadows of what she'd been. She didn't ask for help, so he gave it anyway at the junction to the cargo lifeboat ring. Kevin stopped. A guard stood by the hatch. Not drones, human, wearing unmarked gear, body armor, and sidirms. Not official station security, private contractors, slavers. Syrah ducked behind him, breath tight. "They're waiting for me." They might just be guarding the bay." She didn't answer. Kevin studied Thingles. There was no alternate route. No way to reroute them. He pulled a worn device from his jacket. A short-range impulse tool, barely legal, it'll knock their scanners out, won't stop their weapons. I'm not going back in a cage, she said quietly. I won't survive it a second time. You won't have to. He handed her heist backup key card when the lights. Drop, run, go to the hatch, I'll get him off Yush. Grabbed his arm. No. If we separate, they'll take you. I've handled worse. I haven't. She said, not with someone I care about. The words stopped him. She didn't blush, didn't look away, just said it like fact. He blinked once, then nodded. Then we go together. They move fast. Kevin hit pulse. The lights shorted. The guard shouted in a confusion. Kevin rushed Wenfram. The side slammed him into the bulkhead. The second guard turned to late Sierra, swung a discarded pipe. It connected with the man's shoulder. He fell with a grunt. Kevin grabbed her hand and pulled her through the hatch. They sealed it behind them. The cargo lifeboat interior was tight, stinking of stale errant rust, but the systems powered on Kevin. Through the manual overrides bipsed. The station lockout and triggered the external release. The ship rocked, then detached. A Lotherman filled the cabin as thrusters kicked in. They were moving outside the view. Port Saroan station receded, glimmering. Lights shrinking into a metallic sprawl. Distant and silent now. Space was dark and endless beyond. Kevin slumped into the seat beside the console. He looked over. Sarah was shaking. Adrenaline, maybe, or just the crash after too many days on the edge. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. They didn't speak for a while, just breathe. Then she said, I thought I was going to die here. He squeezed her hand gently. You didn't have to save me. I didn't do it out of obligation. She looked at him. Why then? He searched for the right answer, not the noble one, the true one, because I saw you, he said, and I couldn't unsee you. A beat passed, then she leaned in, no hesitation this time. Their lips met, soft, unsure at first, then fuller. Her fingers curled against his jaw. His hand pressed gently against her ribs, careful of her wound. It was recognition. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. So what now? She whispered, we drift. He said, then we find some place where no one knows either of our names. And if they come for us again, then we fight. She smiled. Together he nodded. Always. The distress beacon held steady. No false pings, no bait signatures, just an encrypted pulse every 30 seconds, cycling across an old relief channel Kevin had used years ago. During a freighter leak emergency, he prayed it still reached someone. They drifted. For 9 hours, the lifeboat systems held. Barely. Air was thin, heat rationed, there was no gravity field. They floated weightless, strapped to the seats. Sail curled in a loose wrap of thermal cloth, her head resting on Kevin's shoulder. She slept on and off. He didn't. His eyes stayed fixed on the scanner, watching the black Noslaver ships, no station chasers, nothing, until finally a soft ping. Then a proximity alert. A long hull survey vessel broke through the void. Old model civilian, registered, not corporate. Marked. Kevin held his breath as they made contact. A calm voice came through Theckums. This is SSV Halden. We receive your signal. Lifeboat 46B. Identify yourself. Aveen, answered voice steady. This is Kevin Jorn, civilian contractor, former UF 0N. Station, I have one passenger with me requesting asylum and medical clearance. There was a pause, then copy that, Kevin. Sure. You're cleared for docking. Hold course and prepare for guided. Real, serious, stirred. Is it real? It's real, he whispered the Haldens. Magnetic tow gripped the lifeboat and pulled them toward the docking chamber. Kevin glanced at her golden eyes were open now, reflecting the rising light as they approached. I never thought I'd see another ship that wasn't a Kajeshi, murmured Kevin. Reached for her hand. This one's a door. The airlock sealed behind them. With a quiet hiss, warm light poured into the cabin as the survey team opened the inner hatch. Medical staff in pale green suits stepped forward, unarmed, calm, no shouting, no scans. Without her mission, just welcome aboard. They ran standard health checks, treated Celerus lingering fever, and offered clean clothes and private quarters. She hesitated at first, then looked to Kevin. You're not leaving? She asked, quiet. I'm staying. He said, wherever you are. They settled into a shared Red Reverie cabin with soft lights, fresh bedding, and miraculously silent snow alarms. No vents hissing, no footsteps coming to take anything away. A week passed by the time the Halden made orbit over the outer fringe colony. Of Ara's fold, Sierra had put on weight, her bruise faded, her movements grew easier. She walked the corridors barefoot without flinching at every noise. Kevin took a repair job aboard part-time. He fixed a power junction in under 4 minutes on his first day, and the crew leader didn't even ask where he'd come from. No one did. People here just accepted that sometimes survivors came from dark places. One night as twilight passed through the viewport and stars glittered like slow-falling sparks, Sierra stepped behind Kevin in their cabin and wrapped her arms around his waist. Her voice was steady now. "You still carry guilt," she said softly. "You still think you didn't do enough for your sister, for the ones who didn't make it." He nodded once. "You can." "Stop," she whispered. "You saved me, that matters. I'm not broken anymore. I'm not property. I'm just a woman now." He turned, pulling her into him. "You're not just anything," he said. "You're Sarah." And she smiled, open, honest, without fear. Weeks later, on a quiet Cliff City housing plot above the seaplanes of Ara, they accepted. AN offered home assembly own. No locks, no fences. Kevin worked in local systems maintenance. Sierra joined hydroponic restoration crew, her hands in clean soil, her legs in sunlight, her breath unmonitored. One morning he woke to find her sitting beside him, hair still damp from the sea air. She looked down at him, thoughtful. "You know," she said, "I used to wonder what it would feel like to be wanted, not for duty, not for what my body could do. It's just to be wanted as I am." He sat up and reached for her face, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You don't need to wonder anymore." She leaned into him. "And you do. You still dream of the station sometimes," he said. "But I don't wake up there anymore. I wake up here." He kissed her slow certain outside. The wind moved through green fields. No alarms, no footsteps, just peace and two people who had no reason to trust the world, learning how to trust each other instead. Together, months past, life on a Thrain's Fold settled in tow, something Kevin and Sierra had never dared to imagine. Quiet, honest, undisturbed. No more alarms, no scanners, no cages. They lived in a small home. North Sea, a simple structure with wide windows and soft light mornings, where a quiet except for the sound of waves rolling against mossy rocks. Kevin worked part-time repairing wind inverters and thermal lines. Sierra spent her days in the greenhouse barefoot, planting new seedlings with clean hands and no one watching her. Then came the day the pregnancy test blinked green at first. She didn't believe it. She sat in the bathroom for nearly 10 minutes, staring, not moving, not speaking. When Kevin found her, she was still holding the test. Her hands were trembling. He didn't speak. Head dropped to his knees and placed both hands gently over hers. "You're sure?" Hissed. She nodded, breath catching 3 times, and for the first time in his life, Kevin cried without shame. Now, months later, her belly curved softly beneath fabric of a pale cotton wrap. She sat in the windowsill every morning, drinking herbal tea, watching the sea mist rise over the cliffs, her skin glowed with warmth, her red hair braided loosely down her back, and peace live in the lines of her face. Kevin walked in from the garden and saw her sitting there, his wife, his home. She looked up and smiled, placing a hand on her belly. "You're staring," she said. "I always will," he replied. He came to her, knelt, and pressed his lips to the slope of her belly. She cuped the back of his head, fingers slow and loving. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered. "Youds, or all of this," Kevin said, "and more. I'm not scared anymore." She added, "Not for me, not for them. You're not alone anymore." And she wasn't. They had no plans beyond tomorrow, no debts, no registry chains, no fake names. Just real loans. Kevin Jorlu and husband, wife, expecting, and finally free.